Hello everyone. My name is Lucas Marin, and today I'm going to share with you something that happened to me last autumn, something that still keeps me awake at night, something that made me question everything I thought I knew about reality. Before I get into this, I need to warn you. What you're about to hear is absolutely real, and it's probably the most terrifying experience of my entire life. I took a night shift at an abandoned asylum, thinking it would be easy money, thinking it would be just another boring security job. But what I found in those dark corridors, what I heard echoing through those empty halls, and what I saw in room 237 will haunt me until the day I die, and honestly, I'm not sure I'll ever be the same person again. Before I begin, I can see that 80% of my viewers haven't subscribed while watching my videos, so please, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss any of my stories. Also, please comment down below where you're watching this from and what time it is in your location. I absolutely love hearing from all of you. And if you have your own paranormal experience or horror story, please email us or leave it in the comments. I read every single one, and who knows, your story might be featured in my next video. Now, let me take you back to September of last year. I was living in a small town just outside Vancouver, trying to make ends meet after losing my job at a warehouse. Money was tight, really tight, and I was desperate for work, any kind of work. I'd been applying everywhere, restaurants, retail stores, construction sites, anything that would pay the bills, but nothing was coming through. My landlord was threatening eviction, my credit cards were maxed out, and I had exactly $47 in my bank account. I was at the lowest point in my life, feeling hopeless, feeling like I was drowning, and no one was throwing me a lifeline. I spent my days scrolling through job boards, sending out resumes, making phone calls, but every door seemed to slam in my face. Overqualified, underqualified, not enough experience, too much experience. It was always something. That's when I saw the ad on a local job board. It was simple, almost too simple. Overnight security guard needed, minimal experience required. $500 per shift, no questions asked. $500 for one night. That was more than I'd make in a week at my old job. I didn't even hesitate. I called the number immediately. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. A woman answered. Her voice was cold, professional, almost robotic, like she was reading from a script. She introduced herself as Tessa Crow, the property manager. She told me the location was an old psychiatric facility that had been closed down for nearly 30 years. The building was scheduled for demolition in a few weeks, but until then, they needed someone to watch over it, make sure no vandals or homeless people got inside. It's completely empty, she said. Just walk the floors once every hour, check the doors, make sure nothing's disturbed. That's it. Easiest money you'll ever make. I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why they were paying so much for such a simple job. I should have been suspicious about why nobody else wanted to do it. But I needed that money, desperately. $500 would buy me another month in my apartment, would keep the lights on, would put food in my refrigerator. Where do I start? I asked. Friday night. She replied. 9 p.m. sharp, don't be late. She gave me the address, told me she'd meet me there, give me the keys, show me around, and then I'd be on my own until 6 a.m., 9 hours, $500. It seemed too good to be true, and looking back now, it absolutely was. That week leading up to Friday felt like the longest week of my life. I tried to research the place, tried to find information about Ashworth Psychiatric Hospital, but there was almost nothing online. Just a few old newspaper articles from the 1960s, mentions of it being built in 1923, and a brief note about it closing in 1994. No details, no explanations, just silence. That should have been my first red flag, but I ignored it. I needed that money too badly to back out now. Friday finally arrived. I spent the day preparing. I bought fresh batteries for my flashlight, charged my phone, made sure I had snacks and water. I told myself it would be fine. Just a boring night in an empty building. Maybe catch up on some podcasts, scroll through social media, collect my money in the morning. How naive I was. I left my apartment at 8 p.m., giving myself plenty of time to find the location. Tessa had warned me it was remote, but I wasn't prepared for just how remote. I drove out of Vancouver as the sun was setting. the sky turning brilliant shades of orange and purple, painting the clouds in colors that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. But as I drove further from the city, as civilization gave way to dense forest, those beautiful colors began to look ominous, threatening. The roads got narrower and narrower, paved streets becoming gravel, gravel becoming dirt, my car bouncing over potholes and tree roots, branches scraping against the sides. I checked my GPS 3 times to make sure I was going the right way, because it felt like I was driving into the middle of nowhere. And in a way, I was. After 40 minutes of driving, the dirt road opened up into a long, winding driveway, covered in weeds and cracked pavement. It curved through the trees, going on for what felt like miles. And then, finally, I saw it. Ashworth Psychiatric Hospital. The building loomed out of the darkness like something from a nightmare. It was massive, at least 5 stories tall, made of dark gray stone that seemed to absorb what little light remained in the sky. Most of the windows were broken, shattered glass glinting in my headlights, and the few that remained intact were covered in grime and decades of neglect, black voids staring back at me like empty eye sockets. The architecture was imposing, institutional, designed to intimidate, to crush the human spirit. Tall towers on either end of the main building, connected by long wings that stretched out like arms, as if the building itself was ready to embrace you, to trap you. The front entrance had a set of heavy wooden doors, one hanging off its hinges, creaking slightly in the wind. Above the doors, carved into the stone, were the words Ashworth Psychiatric Hospital, EST 1923, Healing Through Discipline. Healing through discipline. Those words sent a chill down my spine. The grounds surrounding the building were overgrown, wild. Decades of neglect had allowed nature to reclaim what was once manicured lawns and gardens. I could see the remains of stone pathways, old benches, a fountain that had long since run dry, all being slowly consumed by vegetation. Tessa was waiting for me in the parking lot. Standing next to a black SUV with tinted windows, she was tall, maybe late 40s, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing a business suit that seemed completely out of place in this desolate location. She didn't smile when she saw me, didn't wave, didn't acknowledge my arrival in any friendly way. She just stood there, waiting, like a statue. I parked next to her vehicle and got out. The air was immediately different here, colder, heavier, like the atmosphere itself was pressing down on me. I could smell the forest, pine and earth, but underneath that was something else, something chemical and wrong, like decay mixed with antiseptic. "You're Lucas," she said, not a question, a statement. "Yes, ma'am," I replied. Try to sound professional, try to hide the unease that was already creeping through my body. She looked me up and down, evaluating me, judging whether I was suitable for the job. After a long moment, she nodded. "Follow me." She walked toward the building without waiting for a response, her heels clicking on the cracked pavement, each step echoing in the silence. I grabbed my backpack and flashlight from the car and hurried after her. As we approached the entrance, I noticed something odd. There were scratches on the doors, deep gouges in the wood, like someone, or something, had tried to claw their way out. I was about to mention it, but Tessa was already pushing through the doorway, disappearing into the darkness beyond. I followed her inside. The smell hit me immediately, mold, decay, and something else, something chemical and sharp that burned the back of my throat. I coughed, covering my mouth with my hand, but Tessa seemed unaffected. She just kept walking, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness ahead. The main hallway stretched out before us, long, impossibly long, lined with peeling paint that hung from the walls like dead skin. The floor was covered in debris, broken tiles, chunks of plaster, old papers, and files that had been scattered and forgotten. Rusted gurneys lined the walls, their wheels frozen with rust, their leather restraints still attached. Doors hung open on either side of the corridor, revealing dark rooms filled with overturned furniture, broken equipment, decades of abandonment. Each doorway was like a mouth, a dark throat leading to places I didn't want to explore. "The power's been shut off for years," Tessa said, her voice echoing in the hallway. "So you'll need this." She handed me a large industrial flashlight, much better than the one I'd brought. There are emergency lights in the main corridors that run on backup generators, but most of the building will be dark. You'll need to rely on your flashlight. She gestured to the ceiling, where I could see dim emergency lights, barely providing enough illumination to see. They flickered occasionally, casting strange shadows that seemed to move independently, to writhe on the walls like living things. "You'll stay on the first 3 floors," she continued, walking deeper into the building. "The upper levels are structurally unsafe. The roof has collapsed in several places. The floors are rotted through. Don't go up there under any circumstances. Do you understand?" I nodded. Yes, I understand. But her warning only made me more curious about what was up there. What was on those forbidden floors that I wasn't supposed to see? We walked through the main corridor, past what looked like a reception area. The desk was still there, covered in dust and bird droppings, old papers still scattered across its surface, patient logs, visitors' sign-in sheets, all faded and illegible. Behind the desk were filing cabinets, their drawers hanging open, emptied of whatever records they once held. This was the main entrance, Tessa explained, though I hadn't asked. Patients would be brought here, processed, assigned to their rooms. Back in the old days, families would commit their loved ones, sign the papers, and leave them here. Sometimes they'd visit, sometimes they wouldn't, sometimes they'd forget about them entirely. The way she said it, so matter-of-fact, so cold, it made my skin crawl. We continued down another hallway, this one lined with what looked like administrative offices, doors with frosted glass windows, names still visible on some of them. Dr. Morrison, Dr. Chun, Dr. Holloway. I wondered what these doctors had done, what treatments they prescribed, what horrors they'd overseen. Tessa stopped at a door near the main entrance, pushed it open. "This is the security office. You can use this as your base." The room was small, cramped, with a metal desk pushed against one wall, an old rolling chair with torn upholstery, filing cabinets, and a broken monitor sitting on the desk, probably part of a security system that hadn't worked in decades. The screen was cracked, covered in dust, a relic of technology from another era. On the walls were old maps of the building, floor plans showing the layout of each level. I studied them, trying to memorize the layout, the stairwells, the exits, the rooms I'd need to check. "Do your rounds every hour," Tessa said, handing me a clipboard with a basic checklist. "Mark the time, initial each floor. If you find anything unusual, broken windows, signs of entry, anything out of place, mark it down and call this number." She handed me a business card, plain white, no logo, no company name, just a phone number printed in black ink. "What kind of unusual?" I asked. "Like, what am I looking for exactly?" She paused, looked at me with those cold gray eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Just call if you need to," she said, not really answering the question. "Will you be available all night?" I pressed, "In case I need to reach you." "Someone will answer," she said, which wasn't reassuring at all. She showed me the rest of the first floor, pointed out the emergency exits, showed me where the bathrooms were, though they hadn't had running water in years, warned me again about the upper floors, about staying away from structurally unsound areas, and then she left. Just like that. She walked back to the main entrance, her heels clicking on the tile, opened the door, and stepped out into the night. I followed her, watched as she got into her black SUV, started the engine, and drove away, her taillights disappearing down that long dark driveway, leaving me completely alone. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching the darkness where her car had vanished, listening to the silence, the absolute, oppressive silence. No traffic sounds, no distant voices, no signs of civilization. Just me and this building and the long night ahead. I closed the door, the heavy wood groaning on its hinges, and turned back to face the darkness. For the first hour, I just sat in the security office, trying to calm my nerves, trying to convince myself this was going to be fine. I set up my base, put my backpack on the desk, laid out my snacks and water, checked my phone, full battery, full signal. That was good. At least I could call for help if I needed to. I looked at the checklist Tessa had given me. It was simple, just a list of floors and times. 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight, all the way through to 6 a.m., 9 rounds in total. Each one should take maybe 20 minutes. The rest of the time I could just sit here, relax, maybe watch some videos on my phone. But even sitting in that office, I felt uneasy. The emergency lights in the hallway flickered constantly, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. I could hear the building settling, creaks and groans that echoed through the empty corridors. The wind whistling through broken windows, distant sounds that might have been pipes expanding and contracting, or might have been something else. I tried to distract myself, pulled out my phone, started scrolling through social media, but the Wi-Fi was non-existent out here, and I didn't want to waste my data. So I just sat there listening, waiting, watching the clock slowly tick toward 10 p.m. When the time finally came, I grabbed my flashlight and clipboard, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the hallway. The first floor was mostly administrative offices and the reception area. Everything was trashed, filing cabinets overturned, papers scattered everywhere, old patient records with names and faces I'd never know. I checked each room methodically, made sure the windows were secure, looked for any signs of recent entry, any indication that someone had been here. Nothing. Just an old abandoned building, decades of dust and decay. One of the offices still had furniture, a desk, a chair, bookcases lined with medical texts from the 1950s and 60s. I shined my flashlight on the spines, reading the titles. Modern Psychiatric Practices. Electroconvulsive Therapy, a Comprehensive Guide. Lobotomy, the Miracle Cure. Lobotomy, the Miracle Cure. I shuddered, thinking about the people who had been subjected to these treatments, who had been strapped down, who had trusted these doctors, who had been promised healing and received only horror. I moved on, checking the remaining rooms, marking them off on my clipboard, the reception area, the waiting room, the administrative wing, all clear, all empty, nothing unusual. But that feeling of being watched, it never went away. It followed me through every hallway, into every room, like invisible eyes tracking my every movement, like the building itself was aware of my presence. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just my imagination, just the natural anxiety of being alone in a creepy place. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Something about this place was wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong. I finished the first floor and headed up to the second. The stairwell was dark, my flashlight beam barely penetrating the blackness. The steps were concrete, worn smooth by decades of feet. How many patients had climbed these stairs? How many had been dragged up, screaming, fighting, begging not to be taken to the treatment rooms? The second floor was where the patient rooms were, long corridors stretching in both directions, dozens of small rooms on either side, each one identical, a metal bed frame bolted to the floor, a small window with bars. Some still had restraints attached to the walls, leather straps hanging loose, waiting for wrists and ankles that would never be bound again. I started checking the rooms one by one, shining my flashlight inside, making sure nothing was disturbed. Most of them were empty, just the bed frames and the barred windows, but some still had debris. Old mattresses rotted through, personal items left behind, a shoe, a hairbrush, a photograph face down on the floor. I picked up the photograph in one of the rooms. It was faded, water-damaged, but I could still make out the image. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, smiling at the camera, wearing a summer dress, standing in a garden somewhere. She looked happy, healthy, normal. And then I wondered, what had happened to her? Why had she ended up here? What had this place done to her? Was she one of the ones who got better and left? Or was she one of the ones who died here, forgotten, buried in an unmarked grave? I set the photograph down, feeling a heaviness in my chest, and continued my rounds. As I walked down the corridor, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, that feeling of being watched intensified. It was no longer subtle, no longer just a tingling at the back of my neck. It was a physical sensation, like someone standing right behind me, breathing on my neck, watching every move I made. I kept turning around, spinning quickly, trying to catch whoever or whatever was following me. But the hallway was always empty, just shadows and decay, just the flickering emergency lights and my own footsteps echoing off the walls. I picked up my pace, wanting to finish this floor quickly, wanting to get back downstairs to the relative safety of the security office. I checked the remaining rooms, marked them off on my clipboard, and headed toward the stairs. That's when I passed room 237. I don't know why I remember the number, maybe because it was written in faded paint above the door, or maybe because something about that room felt different, felt wrong. The door was open, just like all the others. I shined my flashlight inside. It looked the same as the other rooms, Metal bed frame, barred window, restraints on the walls, but something made me pause, made me look closer. The room felt colder than the others. My breath was visible in my flashlight beam, forming small clouds that dissipated slowly. And there was a smell, faint but distinct, like flowers, old flowers, the kind left at graves, mixed with something else, something chemical, formaldehyde maybe. I stepped back, closed my eyes, took a deep breath. This was just my mind playing tricks on me, just the power of suggestion, just fear and imagination combining to create something that wasn't really there. I marked the room on my clipboard and continued to the third floor. The third floor was different. The air felt heavier here, thicker, colder, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. The emergency lights barely worked, only every third or fourth one flickering weakly, leaving most of the corridor in near total darkness. My flashlight seemed less effective here, like the darkness was absorbing the light, fighting against it. I could hear water dripping somewhere, a steady rhythmic drip, 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 echoing through the silence. I followed the sound, found a bathroom with broken pipes, water leaking from the ceiling, pooling on the floor, the tiles cracked and covered in mildew. The third floor had treatment rooms. This was where the more intensive procedures had been performed: electroshock therapy, hydrotherapy, insulin shock treatment, all the methods that had been used to cure mental illness back in the days when medicine was more about control than healing. I checked the first treatment room. It still had the equipment, a metal table with restraints, wires hanging from the ceiling, connected to what looked like a control panel on the wall. I imagined someone strapped to that table, electricity coursing through their body, their back arching, their screams echoing through the building, and no one coming to help. No one stopping the treatment, just doctors with clipboards taking notes. I moved on quickly, not wanting to spend more time than necessary in that room. But the other treatment rooms were just as bad, if not worse. One room had a large bathtub, porcelain stained and cracked, with metal restraints built into the sides. This was for hydrotherapy. Patients would be strapped into the tub, submerged in ice-cold or scalding hot water for hours, sometimes until they lost consciousness. Another treatment that was supposed to cure mental illness. Another room had what looked like surgical equipment, tables with straps, cabinets full of instruments I didn't recognize, and on the wall, a chart showing different areas of the brain, with notes about lobotomy procedures, where to make the incision, what part of the brain to sever, how to ensure the patient survived, even if they would never be the same again. I was starting to feel sick, not just from the smell, but from the weight of what had happened here, the suffering, the pain, the inhumanity. I finished checking the treatment rooms and moved toward the long corridor that connected the east and west wings. This was the longest hallway in the building, stretching for what seemed like 100 yards, lined with more patient rooms, more doors, more windows looking into darkness. I was halfway down the corridor when I heard it, a sound coming from the far end of the hallway. It sounded like humming, soft melodic humming, like someone singing a lullaby, the kind a mother would sing to a child, gentle, soothing. But wrong, so wrong in this place. I froze, my flashlight beam shaking slightly in my hand. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing down the corridor. "This is private property. If someone's here, you need to leave." The humming stopped. Silence. Complete and total silence. I waited listening, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands gripping the flashlight so tightly my knuckles were white. Nothing. I convinced myself it was just the wind, or the building settling. Old pipes making noise, sound traveling in strange ways through empty corridors. I'd heard about that, how abandoned buildings could create auditory illusions, how the mind could interpret random sounds as voices or music. I finished checking the third floor, marked it on my clipboard, and headed back downstairs, taking the steps two at a time, eager to get back to the security office. Back to my phone and my snacks and the relative comfort of that small room with the broken monitor. I sat at the desk, breathing heavily, trying to calm my racing heart. I looked at the time. 11:15 p.m., 7 more hours to go. I could do this. Just 6 more rounds, 6 more trips through those corridors, and then morning would come, and Tessa would return, and I'd collect my money and never come back here again. I pulled out my phone, thought about texting someone, letting them know where I was. But who would I text? I didn't have anyone, no family nearby. no close friends. I was alone, in every sense of the word. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me what you think. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do. It really helps the channel grow, and it lets me know that you want to see more content like this. I set my phone down and looked at the clipboard. The next round was at midnight, 45 minutes away. I decided to eat something, keep my energy up. I pulled out a granola bar from my backpack, unwrapped it, took a bite, but I couldn't taste it. My mouth was dry, my stomach was in knots. I forced myself to eat it anyway, to drink some water, to stay focused on the practical things, the normal things. Midnight came too quickly. I grabbed my flashlight and clipboard and stepped back into the hallway. The emergency lights seemed dimmer now, flickering more frequently, like the backup generators were struggling, like the building was slowly losing power, returning to complete darkness. I decided to check the floors in reverse order this time. Third floor first, then second, then first, get the worst part over with quickly. The climb to the third floor felt longer this time, steeper, like I was walking uphill. My legs felt heavy-eyed, even though I'd only been here a few hours. It was like the building was draining my energy, pulling at me, tried to slow me down. I reached the third floor and started my checks, moving faster this time, not wanting to spend more time than necessary up here. I checked the treatment rooms, the patient rooms, the corridors. Everything seemed the same as before, empty, abandoned, nothing unusual. But as I was heading back toward the stairs, I noticed something. One of the doors that had been open before was now closed. I stopped, staring at it, trying to remember. Had I closed it? Had I walked past it and unconsciously pulled it shut? No, I was certain it had been open. I approached slowly, my hand reaching for the doorknob. It was ice cold, colder than anything else in the building, like touching frozen metal. I turned it slowly, the door opening with a long, drawn-out creak. The room was empty, just like before. Metal bed frame, barred window, restraints on the walls, nothing unusual. But then I saw it, sitting in the middle of the floor, something that hadn't been there before. A child's toy, a small wooden rocking horse, old and weathered, with faded paint and a cracked saddle, and it was moving, gently rocking back and forth, like someone had just been playing with it. My blood ran cold. I hadn't seen that toy before. I was certain of it. I had checked this room on my first round. It had been empty, completely empty. I backed out of the room slowly, my eyes fixed on the rocking horse, watching it move, listening to the soft creaking sound it made. Creak, 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 rhythmic, mechanical, impossible. I closed the door, my hands trembling, and marked it on my checklist with shaking handwriting. I moved on, trying to convince myself there was a rational explanation. Maybe it had been there all along, and I just hadn't noticed. Maybe I'd been so focused on checking for broken windows and signs of entry that I'd missed it. Maybe a draft was making it rock. But deep down, I knew better. Someone or something had put that toy there, had placed it in the middle of that empty room, while I was downstairs, while my back was turned, which meant I wasn't alone in this building. I finished the third floor quickly, practically running through the remaining checks, and headed down to the second floor. I was moving on autopilot now, my body going through the motions, while my mind raced with questions, with fear, with the growing realization that I had made a terrible mistake taking this job. The second floor seemed darker now, the shadows deeper, more oppressive. I checked the rooms methodically, trying to stay focused, trying not to think about the rocking horse, trying not to imagine what else might be in this building with me. I passed room 237 again. The door was still open. I shined my flashlight inside. Everything looked normal, the same as before, metal bed frame, barred window, restraints. But the temperature, it was even colder now, my breath forming thick clouds. And that smell, those old flowers, it was stronger, more pungent, making my eyes water. I moved away quickly, not wanting to linger, and finished checking the rest of the floor. I headed downstairs to the first floor, checked the administrative wing, the reception area. Everything seemed fine, normal, undisturbed. I made it back to the security office, marked the time on my clipboard. 1:05 a.m., 5 more rounds to go. I sat down, trying to catch my breath, trying to think clearly. Should I call the number on the business card, tell someone about the rocking horse, tell them I thought someone else was in the building? But what would I say? That a toy appeared in an empty room, that I heard humming, that I felt like I was being watched. It sounded crazy. They'd probably think I was just scared, that I couldn't handle the job, that I was making excuses to leave early. And I needed this money. I needed it so badly. I decided to wait, to do one more round, and if I found anything else, anything concrete, then I'd call. At 1 a.m., during my third round, I started on the first floor again, but I decided to explore more thoroughly this time, to check rooms I'd only glanced at before. Maybe there was a homeless person hiding somewhere. Maybe that would explain the toy, the sounds, everything. I went deeper into the administrative wing, past the offices I'd already checked, into areas that seemed less traveled, less maintained. The walls here were in worse condition, the paint completely gone in places, revealing the bare stone underneath, water damage, mold growing in dark patches. I found a door I hadn't noticed before. It was partially hidden behind a collapsed filing cabinet. I pushed the cabinet aside. It scraped loudly against the floor, echoing through the empty building, and opened the door. It was a stairwell, narrow, steep, leading down to a basement. But Tessa had said there were only 3 floors. She'd show me the floor plans. There had been no mention of a basement. I hesitated, shining my flashlight down the stairs, the beam disappearing into darkness. I should probably just close the door. Forget I'd found it. Stick to the floors I was supposed to check. But curiosity got the better of me, and maybe, just maybe, if someone was hiding in this building, this is where they'd be. In the basement, away from my rounds, away from my flashlight. I started down the stairs, each step creaking under my weight, the air getting colder, damper, the smell of mold overwhelming. I counted 20 steps before I reached the bottom, and found myself in a long corridor, brick walls, low ceiling, water pipes running overhead, dripping, always dripping. This wasn't just a basement, it was a tunnel system. I could see passages branching off in multiple directions. This must have connected different parts of the hospital, maybe even extended to other buildings on the property. A way to move patients, or bodies, without being seen from above. I followed the main corridor, my flashlight revealing doors on either side. I tried the first one, locked, the second one, also locked, but the third one opened. Inside was a small room, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, brick walls, no windows, a metal ring bolted to the floor, with a chain attached, the kind used for restraints, and on the walls, scratches, hundreds of scratches, like someone had tried to claw their way out. Had spent days, weeks, maybe months, trapped in this dark room. This was an isolation cell, a place where they'd put the most difficult patients, the ones who wouldn't cooperate, the ones who fought back. They'd chain them down here, in the dark alone, until they broke, until they became compliant. I backed out of the room, feeling sick, and continued down the corridor. I found more isolation cells. Some still had the chains. Some had messages scratched into the walls, names, dates. Desperate pleas for help. Please let me out. I'm not crazy. Someone help me. How long had these people been down here? Had anyone heard their screams? Had anyone cared? I was about to turn back, to return to the first floor, when I heard something. Footsteps. Not my footsteps, someone else's, coming from deeper in the tunnel system. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. Hello, I called out. Is someone there? The footsteps stopped. Silence. And then a voice, distant, echoing, barely more than a whisper. Lucas. My name. Someone had said my name. No one knew I was here, no one except Tessa. And that voice, it wasn't hers, it was softer, younger, feminine. Lucas, why did you come down here? I backed up slowly, my flashlight beam sweeping the corridor, looking for the source of the voice, but I saw nothing. Just shadows, just darkness. Lucas, you shouldn't be here. You should leave. Leave while you still can. I turned and ran back the way I'd come, my flashlight bouncing wildly. I could hear the footsteps behind me now, faster, matching my pace, getting closer. I reached the stairs and climbed, taking them 3 at a time, burst through the door, slammed it behind me, and stood there, breathing heavily, my whole body shaking. What the hell was that? I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling so badly I could barely unlock it. I dialed the number on the business card. It rang. and rang, and rang, but nobody answered. Just a clicking sound, then static, then dead air. I tried again, same result, nothing. I was completely alone. I made my way back to the security office, locked the door behind me, pushed the desk against it, and sat down, trying to calm my racing heart, trying to think rationally. Someone was in this building with me. Someone who knew my name. Someone who was watching me, following me, and I had no way to call for help. I looked at my phone. Still had a signal. Still had battery. But the only number I had wasn't answering. I thought about calling the police, but what would I tell them? That I heard voices, that a toy appeared in an empty room. They'd think I was crazy. And maybe this place was driving me insane. Maybe I was having some kind of psychological break. I stood up from the desk, walked to the window, looked out at the darkness, at the forest surrounding this building, at my car sitting in the parking lot, so close, just a few 100 feet away. But it might as well have been miles. I could leave right now, forget the money, forget this job, just get in my car and drive away. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was desperation, maybe it was the voice in my head telling me I was being ridiculous, that there was a rational explanation for everything. Or maybe I needed to know. I checked the time. 2:30 a.m. I'd missed my 2 a.m. round, but I didn't care. I wasn't going back down to that basement, and I wasn't checking those floors again until I absolutely had to. I sat back down, tried to focus on my breathing. In through my nose, out through my mouth, slow, steady, calm. But then I heard it again. That humming. The same melody I'd heard earlier on the 3rd floor. But this time it was closer, much closer. Right outside the security office door. I watched the door handle. It was turning, slowly, deliberately. Someone was trying to get in, but the desk was blocking it. I'd pushed it against the door. They couldn't get in. I was safe. The humming continued, that soft lullaby. And then a voice, the same voice from the basement, young, feminine. Lucas, why are you hiding from me? I just want to talk. I didn't respond, didn't move, barely breathed. I've been here so long, so very long, and you are the first person who's come in such a long time. Please, don't leave me alone again. The door handle stopped turning. The humming faded. Footsteps walked away down the corridor, getting softer, softer, until they disappeared completely. I waited 10 minutes, 20 minutes, making sure whoever, or whatever, that was had really gone. And then I heard my phone buzz. A text message from an unknown number. I picked it up with trembling hands, unlocked the screen, and read the message. 3rd floor, room 237. Come now. My stomach dropped. Room 237. That cold room. The one with the smell of old flowers. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button. But what would I say? Who would I even be replying to? Another message came through. She's waiting for you. She has something to show you. Don't be afraid. I set the phone down, rubbed my eyes. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of prank. Maybe there were cameras hidden in this building. Maybe this was some sick reality show. Maybe Tessa was testing me, seeing how long I'd last before I cracked. But the messages kept coming. You need to understand what happened here. You need to see. Room 237. Now, I looked at the clipboard, at my checklist, at the time. 3:15 a.m. I was supposed to do my 3 a.m. round anyway. I was already behind schedule. And despite everything, despite the terror, despite every instinct screaming at me to leave, I found myself standing up, moving the desk away from the door, picking up my flashlight. I had to know. I had to understand what was happening in this building. I opened the door, stepped into the hallway. The emergency lights were barely working now. Most of them completely dead. My flashlight was the only source of light, cutting through the darkness like a knife. I walked toward the stairs, climbed to the 2nd floor. The building was completely silent now. No creaks, no groans, no dripping water, just oppressive, suffocating silence. I reached the 2nd floor, started down the corridor toward room 237. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was walking through water, like the air itself was becoming solid, trying to stop me. The door to room 237 was closed now. I reached for the handle. It was freezing, so cold it burned my hand. I turned it anyway, pushed the door open. The room was exactly as I'd seen it before, metal bed frame, barred window, restraints on the walls. But now there was something else. A figure, sitting on the bed, illuminated by my flashlight. A young woman, maybe 19 or 20, wearing a faded hospital gown, her hair long and dark, hanging over her face, her hands folded in her lap, completely still. I stood in the doorway, unable to move, unable to speak. She lifted her head slowly, and I saw her face. She was beautiful, delicate features, pale skin. But her eyes were wrong, empty, hollow, like there was nothing behind them, no life, no soul. "Lucas," she said, her voice the same one I'd heard in the basement, the same one outside the security office. "Thank you for coming." I tried to speak, but no words came out. My throat was closed, my mouth dry. "My name was Victoria," she continued, her voice soft, sad. "I was a patient here, a long time ago, back when this place was still open, back when they did terrible things to people like me." She stood up, moved toward me. I wanted to run, wanted to turn and flee, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen, paralyzed. "They brought me here when I was 17. She said, getting closer. "My parents said I was troubled, that I needed help, that I was having episodes. But I wasn't sick. I was just different. I saw things other people couldn't see, heard things they couldn't hear, and they were afraid of me." She was right in front of me now, close enough to touch. I could see the details of her face, the sadness in those empty eyes, the pain. "The doctors tried everything," she whispered. "Pills, therapy, restraints, electroshock. Nothing worked. Nothing made me normal. So they brought me to room 237, this room, and they performed their final treatment." She reached up, moved her hair aside, and I saw it. A scar running across her forehead, a lobotomy scar. "They cut into my brain," she said, tears forming in her dead eyes. "They severed the parts that made me who I was. They took away my gifts, my personality, my essence, and they left me here, in this room, to die." I finally found my voice. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry that happened to you." She smiled, a sad, broken smile. "I didn't want to die," she said. "I fought. I screamed. I begged them to help me. But no one came. No one cared, and eventually my body gave up. But my spirit stayed." She stepped back, gestured to the walls, and I saw them now, names, hundreds of names, carved into the paint, into the plaster, into the stone itself. "All of us," she said. "Everyone who died here, everyone who was forgotten. We're still here, trapped, unable to leave, unable to rest." I looked at the names. Victoria James, 1968. Robert Morrison, 1971. Alice Chin, 1965. David Holloway, 1973. On and on, dozens, hundreds, all the people who had suffered in this building, who had been broken, who had been destroyed. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Because someone needs to know," Victoria said. "Someone needs to tell our story. Someone needs to remember us. We're not monsters. We were just people, people who needed help, who deserved compassion. But instead we were tortured, experimented on, killed." She moved back to the bed, sat down, her form becoming translucent, fading. "Tell them," she whispered, her voice echoing distant. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them we existed. Tell them we mattered." And then she was gone, just like that. The room was empty again, cold, silent, but the names on the walls remained, testament to the horror, a memorial to the forgotten. I stood there for a long moment, processing what I'd seen, what I'd heard. Part of me wanted to believe it was a hallucination, that the stress and fear had created an elaborate vision. But I knew better. What I had experienced was real. Victoria was real. And her suffering, their suffering. It had happened in this building, in these rooms, and no one had stopped it. No one had cared. I left room 237, closed the door gently, respectfully, and made my way back downstairs. I didn't check the rest of the floors, didn't do the remaining rounds. I just sat in the security office, waiting for morning, waiting for Tessa to return. The rest of the night passed slowly. I saw no more apparitions, heard no more voices. It was as if Victoria had said what she needed to say, had shown me what she needed to show me, and now she was resting, at least for the moment. When dawn finally broke, when the first rays of sunlight pierced through the broken windows, illuminating the dust particles floating in the air, I felt a weight lift from my chest. I had survived. I had made it through the night. At exactly 6 a.m., I heard a car approaching, Tessa's black SUV, pulling into the parking lot. I grabbed my backpack, my clipboard, and walked outside, breathing in the fresh morning air, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. Tessa got out of her vehicle, looked at me with those cold gray eyes. "How was your night?" She asked, no emotion, no concern. I handed her the clipboard. "Fine," I lied. Everything was quiet. She looked at the checklist, noticed I'd missed the last few rounds, raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. She reached into her jacket, pulled out an envelope, handed it to me. $500 as promised. "Thank you for your service." I took the envelope, felt the weight of the cash inside. Money I desperately needed. Money that came at a terrible cost. "Will you be back next week?" She asked. I looked at the building, at those dark windows, at the stone walls that held so much pain, so much suffering. "No," I said firmly. "I won't be coming back." She nodded, as if she'd expected that answer. "Most people don't," she said quietly, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes, something that might have been sadness, or regret, or guilt. "What happened here?" I asked, unable to stop myself. "What really happened in that building?" Tessa looked away, stared at the forest. "What happens in all places like this?" She said, "People with good intentions make terrible mistakes. They think they're healing, but they're hurting. They think they're helping, but they're destroying. And by the time they realize the truth, it's too late. The damage is done." "Did you know Victoria James?" I asked, watching her reaction. Her eyes widened slightly, just for a moment, then returned to that cold professional mask. "That's not a name I'm familiar with," she said, but I could tell she was lying. "She was a patient here." I pressed. "She died in room 237. She and hundreds of others, their names are carved into the walls. They deserve to be remembered." Tessa was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice softer, more human. "The files were destroyed years ago, when the hospital closed. Everything was sealed, buried, forgotten. That's how the families wanted it. They were ashamed. They wanted to pretend their loved ones had never been here. But they were here." I said, "They lived here, they died here, and their spirits are still here, still trapped, still suffering." Tessa looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. "I know," she whispered. "I know they are. That's why we can't keep security guards. That's why we pay so much for one night. Because everyone who works here, everyone who spends time in that building, they see things, they hear things, and they never come back." "Then why not tear it down?" I demanded. "Why keep it standing? Why let it continue to hurt people?" "The demolition is scheduled for next month," she said. "But even then, I don't know if it will help. I don't know if destroying the building will free them, or if they'll just remain here, in this place, forever." She got back in her SUV, started the engine, and before she drove away, she looked at me one last time. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry you had to experience that. Most people just hear sounds, see shadows, but you actually spoke to them. That's rare. That means they chose you. They wanted you to know their story." And then she drove away, leaving me standing there, holding an envelope full of cash and carrying the weight of 100 untold stories. I got in my car, drove back to the city, back to my apartment, back to my normal life. But nothing felt normal anymore. Nothing felt the same. I spent the next few weeks researching, digging through old archives, finding newspaper articles, death certificates, anything I could about Ashworth Psychiatric Hospital. And what I found was horrifying. Between 1923 and 1994, over 300 patients died in that facility, 300 documented deaths. But the real number was probably much higher. Many patients were never officially recorded, especially in the early years. Families would drop them off, sign the papers, and forget they ever existed. The causes of death varied: suicide, complications from treatment, infections, neglect, but many were simply listed as natural causes, which cover a multitude of sins. I found Victoria's death certificate. Victoria Marie James died January 15th, 1968. Age 19. Cause of death listed as complications from surgical procedure. She'd been in the hospital for 2 years, admitted by her parents, diagnosed with schizophrenia. Though reading between the lines, it seemed like she was just a sensitive girl who saw the world differently, who didn't fit into the narrow definition of normal. She'd undergone multiple treatments, including the lobotomy that ultimately killed her, and she died alone, in room 237, forgotten by everyone except the other patients, who carved her name into the wall. I found dozens of other stories, other patients, other deaths. Robert Morrison was a veteran who came back from war with trauma. They gave him electroshock therapy until his heart gave out. Alice Chun was a young mother suffering from postpartum depression. They kept her in isolation for months until she stopped eating, stopped living. David Holloway was a teenager with autism. His family couldn't handle him, so they sent him away, and he died from neglect at age 16. Every name on those walls had a story, had a life, had people who should have loved them, protected them. Instead, they were abandoned, tortured, killed. I tried to write about it, tried to share what I'd learned, but every time I sat down to type, I'd start crying. The weight of their stories, their suffering, it was too much, and the nightmares started. Every night I'd dream about that building, about walking those dark corridors, about seeing those faces in the windows, about hearing their voices calling my name, begging me to remember them, to tell their stories. I'd wake up in cold sweats, gasping for air, feeling like I was suffocating, feeling like the walls of my apartment were closing in, like I was trapped in one of those isolation cells, chained to the floor, screaming for help that would never come. My landlord stopped threatening eviction. The $500 bought me another month, and I found a new job. Nothing special, just warehouse work again. But it paid the bills, kept me fed, kept me housed. But I couldn't stop thinking about Ashworth. I couldn't stop thinking about Victoria, about all of them. I went back once, about 3 weeks after my night shift. I drove out there during the day, when the sun was high, when everything looked less threatening, less ominous. The building was still standing, still waiting for demolition. I walked around the perimeter, looked through the broken windows, saw those empty corridors, those abandoned rooms, and I felt them watching me. All of them, the forgotten, the broken, the dead. I stood at the front entrance, where Tessa had left me that night, and I spoke to them. "I remember you," I said, my voice carrying through the broken windows, into the darkness beyond. "I remember Victoria. I remember Robert. I remember Alice. I remember David. I remember all of you, and I'm going to make sure others remember too. I'm going to tell your stories. I'm going to make sure the world knows what happened here, what was done to you." I don't know if they heard me. I don't know if it mattered, but I needed to say it, needed to make that promise. The building was demolished 2 weeks later. I watched the news coverage, saw the wrecking ball smashing into those stone walls, saw the towers crumbling, saw decades of horror reduced to rubble and dust. The reporter on TV talked about how the site would be cleared, how they were planning to build a park, a memorial garden, a place of peace and healing. But I wondered, would it be enough? Would destroying the physical building free those trapped spirits, or would they remain, wandering that patch of ground, forever looking for someone to remember them, to acknowledge their pain? I still think about that night. Even now, months later, I still think about Victoria sitting on that bed, showing me her scars, telling me her story, asking me to remember. And I do remember. I remember every detail, every word, every name on those walls. I've tried to share the story before, tried to tell people what I experienced, but most don't believe me. They think I was hallucinating, that the stress and fear played tricks on my mind, that there's a rational explanation for everything. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I know what I felt. And I know that what happened at Ashworth Psychiatric Hospital was real. The suffering was real. The deaths were real. And the spirits that remain are real. This building, this place of supposed healing, became a chamber of horrors, a place where the most vulnerable members of society were sent to be fixed, to be cured, to be made normal. But instead they were broken beyond repair. destroyed by the very people who were supposed to help them. And the worst part, the part that keeps me awake at night, is that Ashworth wasn't unique. There were hundreds of facilities just like it, all across the country, all across the world, places where similar horrors occurred, where patients were subjected to experimental treatments, where they died alone and forgotten. Some of those buildings are still standing, still abandoned, still holding their dark secrets. And I wonder, how many Victorias are out there? How many spirits are trapped, waiting for someone to hear their stories, to remember their names, to acknowledge that they existed, that they mattered? I'm telling you the story today because I made a promise to Victoria, to all of them, that I would share what happened, that I would make sure they weren't forgotten. So please remember their names, remember their stories, and if you ever drive past an abandoned psychiatric hospital, an old asylum, a forgotten institution, say a prayer for the people who suffered there, the people who died there, the people who are still there waiting, because they deserve to be remembered. They deserve to have their stories told. They deserve to be more than just forgotten ghosts in forgotten buildings. They were people, real people, with hopes and dreams and fears and pain, and what happened to them should never have happened, should never be allowed to happen again. I still have nightmares. I still wake up hearing that humming, that lullaby. I still see Victoria's face, those empty eyes, that sad smile, and sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in my apartment, I swear I can hear her voice, thanking me, telling me she can rest now, that they all can rest. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if telling their story was enough, but I hope it was. I hope they found peace. I hope they're no longer trapped in that terrible place. And I desperately hope, that sharing this with you, letting you into this nightmare I experienced, helps in some small way to honor their memory, to give meaning to their suffering. The money I earned that night, the $500, I donated it every cent, to a mental health charity, to organizations that help people who are struggling, who need support, who deserve compassion and proper care instead of the horrors inflicted at places like Ashworth. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough, but it was something. It was a small way to make something good come from that terrible night. I never worked as a security guard again, never took another night shift in an abandoned building. Some experiences change you, mark you, and you can never go back to who you were before. I'm different now. I see the world differently. I'm more aware of the pain around me, more conscious of the forgotten, the overlooked, the people society would rather ignore. And I'm more careful about the jobs I take, the places I go, because I learned that night that some buildings hold more than just bricks and mortar. They hold memories, they hold pain, they hold the echoes of every terrible thing that happened within their walls. So that's my story. That's what happened to me at Ashworth Psychiatric Hospital. That's the night that changed everything. I know some of you won't believe me. Some of you will think I made it all up, that I'm looking for attention, looking for views. But I'm telling you the truth. Every word of it is true. And if you take nothing else from this story, take this. Be kind to people who are struggling. Be compassionate to those who are different. Don't judge what you don't understand. And never let another place like Ashworth exist. Never let vulnerable people be forgotten, abandoned, destroyed. They deserve better. We all deserve better. Thank you so much for watching this video. I know it was long. I know it was heavy. But these stories need to be told. These experiences need to be shared. If you made it this far, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel and lets me know you appreciate this content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Turn on notifications, because I have more stories to share, more experiences that need to be heard. Comment down below and let me know what you thought of the story. Did it scare you? Did it move you? Do you believe me? I read every single comment, and I love hearing from you all. Also, tell me where you're watching from, what time it is in your location, and what kind of stories you want to hear next. Paranormal experiences, urban exploration, true crime, historical mysteries. Let me know what interests you, and I'll do my best to deliver. If you have your own paranormal experience, your own horror story, your own encounter with the unexplained, please share it in the comments or email me. Your story might be featured in a future video. And who knows, maybe telling your story will help someone else. Maybe it will help you process what you experienced. We're building a community here. A community of people who have seen things, experienced things, who know that there's more to this world than what we can see and touch. And I want this channel to be a safe space to share those experiences, to be heard, to be believed. Once again, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering Victoria and all the others who suffered at Ashworth Psychiatric Hospital. Stay safe out there. Be kind to one another. And remember, some places are abandoned for a reason. Some buildings should remain empty, and some doors should never be opened. Until next time, this is Lucas Marin signing off.